He currently serves as Executive Director of Religions for Peace USA. He has been a servant leader in the interfaith movement for over 2 years. He is also a member of Board of Trustees of Parliament of the World's Religions as well as North American Interfaith Network. He is a founding trustee of Sikh Council for Interfaith Relations. He is former advisory board member of the Journal of Interreligious Studies and has served on the board of National Religious Coalition Against Torture as well as World Sikh Council, America region. In 2016, he was awarded Luminosa Award for Unity of Focolare Movement. Locally, he has worked with Interfaith Association of Central Ohio for over 20 years and is co-editor of Landmark Ohio Bicentennial book Religion in Ohio, Profiles of Faith Communities. Recently in October 2020, he was honored by the National Council of Churches in the US with its 2020 Gandhi Award for excellence in interreligious communication. So he can be reached. I must write your email address. So our today's topic, and he has honored us to be here at FC College University. I think this is the best opportunity to have wonderful interaction with a lot of learning in classes as a guest speaker, rather than have a big seminar and without student and speaker interaction. So, sir, to me you and up to you. Topic of today's discussion is the role of religion or religions in society. So, sir, this is the class of Islamic history. We are covering the time period of Holy Prophet, emergence of Islam, Caliphate, and then Abbasid Empire, and Umayyad. And this class is open. There is with pluralistic perspectives, without any bias. You know the debates, the controversies, the sectarian thing. But in 3 or 4 classes, we have set the domain regarding the pluralistic, aspects of religion, as well as the role of religion in the society. And we are talking to be helpful in this regard. So over to you, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
I teach civil engineering in Ohio State University in the USA. I have lived in India for 23 years, and I've lived in the US for 32 years. So what I thought I would do is talk today about the role of religion, looking at essentially South Asia, and when I say South Asia, I mean India, Pakistan, Bangladesh area, Sri Lanka, and also the United States. And I'll also make some comments on Europe. And pardon my voice, I'm recovering from a bad throat. So, religion has always played an important role in society, always. The country that I grew up in, India, very much like Pakistan, has had what I call quite a mixed bag. Religion has been very helpful in society and also has been not so helpful. And so I'll touch upon all that. And what you find is that that comment also applies to religion in much other part of the world, including Europe and the United States. I currently serve as the executive director of a national organization in the US called Religions for Peace USA. And for that organization, every national major US religious organization, like the Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church, which actually governs this topic, every Protestant denomination, Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Hindu, Buddhist, Baha'i, they are all members, official members of organizations. So I work with a very vast swath of religious traditions. And so this topic of the role of religion in society, I culture cannot, you can be committed to your culture, but religion is something very specific. Okay? It can be very, very personal. So what I would like to do is when I talk about the role of religion in society, I will talk in two ways. One is, how does religion play a role in personal life? Okay? And then I'll call societal as communal life. Okay? With the community. And how this impacts in all these different parts of the world. So let's first begin with the person. We are now at a point in the world where it is not enough for me to say that this is how I view my faith. We are now being forced to interact with other people. That now I'm okay, this is my religion, but how do I relate to somebody of a different religion? Okay? That's that personal life perspective. And I believe there are 4 ways in which we can view people of other faiths. See, my focus is primarily on interreligious work. Not within your tradition, but how do you deal with people of other faiths, how do you view them, and what role do they play in society? So I believe there are 4 ways through which this interaction can happen. One is what I call the exclusive approach. By exclusive approach, I mean is that my religion and my narrow interpretation of my religion is only the true one. So you can be a Sikh, but you have to wear black clothes and you can wear a red turban. So what this exclusivism is about my faith, friends, and then my very narrow view of that faith. So even if there are Sikhs who wear a white turban, they are not good enough, right? So each one of you should become a Sikh, and each one of you start wearing a red turban and a black shalwar kameez and a brown peshari. This is one way to look at people of other faiths. Is keep in mind, this is not limited to any one religious tradition. There are people in every major religious tradition who are exclusivists. Okay? The second one is the other opposite, what I call inclusive. By inclusive, I mean is that my religion is so vast that, all of you who are here, you really come under me. But you see, again, what I'm creating an umbrella. This is about me and my supreme beliefs, right? This was also about me and my supreme beliefs. If Baba is saying, you all have your own religions, but what I believe in is a part of that. So it still is about me. The third one is what we call the common terminology is melting pot, and the technical term that's used is multi-conspiracy. Now, sorry, this is not Professor Wright, right? We scribble at the end, so we know what we mean at the end. In a melting pot, what is happening is that you have many different traditions, but the intent is they all blend together into one. That is to say, religious differences are not important. So if you have, let's say, in India, I'll give you an example. If you have a Hindu friend and you are a Muslim and you are prohibited from worshipping idols, you say, okay, that's fine, because I have to live in a Hindu society, I'm going to go and I'll worship at my Hindu friends and go before idols. That's what multiculturalism is. In multiculturalism, the majority really defines what the melting pot is. There's only one flavor in the melting pot. There's not one. There is the presence of that. There is diversity here. But diversity is only good if it creates unity. The focus of the melting pot is to create unity in society. The challenge you can see clearly is religious minorities have a real problem. For example, I have met many Christians in Pakistan. Unless they become good friends and you ask them, they will not openly share that they are Christians. You all have had some friends. That's what I'm talking about. The melting pot puts a lot of pressure. The fourth one is what we call a toss salad. And the technical term, anybody know this term? Begins with a T. Who said that? Yeah, that's good. That's that exactly. This term was originally given by Professor Diana Eck from Harvard University. What she is saying the focus of religious pluralism is not unity. The focus of pluralism is to make relationships. So you can meet in a public space, not in private. In a public space where you can engage with one another simply to build relationships. This focus here is to build relationships with others. Just to get know people. The focus here is not unity. And this is what is where I really focus on. And keep in mind that some of us might view, when it comes to looking at, let's say, Christians in this country, you might be in a melting pot. When it comes to everybody else, you might be exclusive. So keep in mind that we aren't always, it's not a, we keep changing with time and communities that are there. So keep in mind that's the way through which we as human beings operate when it comes to religion. So I just want to, any questions or comments up till now on the 4 ways in which we can relate to people of other faiths. Okay, I will keep going then. So once we get to the point, the question is, then when we engage with people of other faiths, there are 2 primary mechanisms through which we can do that. One is dialogue. We, Professor, will feel English language if we ever play it, okay? And the second is called action. Religious pluralism is intended to support both these activities. Now, what do I mean by that? Dialogue is a process through which you meet with somebody of another faith and you are having a conversation. Now, those, and they can be at different levels. This dialogue can simply be a conversation, it can be a debate, or it could be a consultation. And there are many words that can be used. What you don't want to do is get to a point where you are debating. That is to say, if I am right, you don't have to be wrong. Okay? So we both can be partially right? The intent is to be able to learn from one another. And this dialogue happens in 2 ways. One is what I call interfaith. And you heard this one, right? Interfaith dialogue that happens. The other is called interreligious. And I'll tell you the difference because I do both of them. Interfaith dialogue happens between 2 people of different religions. When you're talking about so if you and me are having a conversation, do you mind sharing if you have a religious tradition?
Any religious tradition?
Do you believe in any particular religious tradition? Islam, let's say, right? Okay. So when you and me talk, and let's say we sit over coffee, and you are talking as a Muslim, I'm talking as a Sikh. So we simply are speaking from our worldviews. That is called an interfaith dialogue. If on the other hand, you and me sit down and we are talking on behalf of the religious traditions. So I'm talking on behalf of the Sikh community. You're on behalf of the Muslim community. That is what we call interreligious dialogue. So this dialogue, this happens between religious leaders. And you can see that for women, this is challenging. Because most religious traditions, we say everything good about women, right? We say Prophet Muhammad said so, Guru Nanak said so, but when it comes to religious leadership, there aren't any women at the table, right? We have to accept that we as religious communities have patriarchy built into us. And your generation will change it. Because you ask the obvious question. There's the elephant in the room. So there's an elephant sitting there of patriarchy, and nobody's calling it out. It's an invisible elephant, right? But it's sitting right there. So for this reason, interfaith dialogue is easier to begin with. This happens at the work that I do, because my representatives there are speaking. Yes.
So,
That's exactly what I have a question. Raise your hand and we talk about it.
it's a very, it might come out as a great question, but so the words that you use, faith and religion. So you use faith because it's something personal, and religion because you use that faith.
As a teacher, you know that you sometimes don't say certain things, but you allow the students to figure it out. That's exactly what you've done. Yes.
So how can inter-religious dialogue be objective in nature? Because you cannot represent the dialogue.
Sometimes you can. So I can go and meet the bishop of Lahore, the Catholic bishop of Lahore, and I work with the Global Sikh Council. So when I'm meeting with him, I'm doing the inter-religious style. That's when you are representing. But it's much more difficult because there's a lot of diversity here, right? Here is the official conversations between different religions. So as yesterday you have a question, what I would like you to do is raise your hand, say your name, where you're from. Yes. You can take your mask off when you speak. Thank you.
I'm from Islamic history class. So I wanted to ask a question regarding, as you mentioned before, personal life community includes 4 types of the degrees which we are practicing are paid. So does it link it with the interfaith dialogue when we are having?
Absolutely. Because you could be here, right? And build conversation through interfaith dialogue, and it can be done among friends, right? For example, if you know in this country, if you know that there is a Hindu colleague or a Christian colleague, talk to them. What does it feel like for you? To be a Christian, do you feel that things happen here in your community that you find challenging? Believe me, every religious community is a minority somewhere in the world. Never forget that. Every religious community is a minority somewhere else in the world. So everything is connected. Yes, your name, where you're from, and your question.
My name is Aisha. I am from Islamic history class. So I actually hold this opinion that in some continent, or especially in Pakistan, if you are to bring any religious revolution, so it's nearly impossible. I think it's feel good in the class, but if you have to bring any religious revolution, so for example, if I am a Wahhabi, so the other party would say, oh no, we are not going to follow you because you are a Wahhabi and I am a Sunni. And then if we go, and if we go to the melting point where our focus is to bring unity, so the other person would say, oh no, you are a Punjabi and I am a Balochi and I wouldn't follow you. So how do you bring that? Because it feels good in the class, but since what I feel is that we stand in the extreme side and we do not have, we are not centralists here in Pakistan, or you can say in India or the subcontinent. So how do you bring the unity?
Okay. Let me first clarify. Unity should not be the objective of a society. Keep in mind that the status quo only helps the oppressor. It never helps the oppressed. That is why no government wants a protest movement, right? Because it's throughout the whole world. Democracies today, this whole experiment nation states has shown one thing, that democracies have become smarter in how to perceive pluralism. Look at Trumpism, right? How did Trump get votes? By demonizing Mexican immigrants, by calling almost all Muslims to be banned from entering the country. Can you imagine? And the Supreme Court was not able to do anything. Look at Modi in India. He is currently using Islamophobia to show why. Because he gets votes from you. So unity, I believe, is not the goal of a society. It should be pluralism, where you can have relationships with others. So, if let's say you have a Hindu friend here, and some problems happen in Sindh, you have a person who's Hindu, right? That who is your friend? You can relate to somebody. So this is personal. This is about building relationships. Unity, I believe. Let me just say it out. India and Pakistan have come up with what I call, I write here, There is patriotism, okay? There is no doubt. Patriotism tied with unity, but what both countries have, I believe, is a patriotism of hate. What do I mean by that? To love Pakistan.
Nationalism.
That's exactly. So why is nationalism needed? Because the country wants to be. Why in this country is Punjabi not taught? Punjab is one of the largest provinces. The number of people live here. So in some ways, Punjabi is a national threat to the national identity of Pakistan being Urdu. India is the same issue with Hindi. So the point I want to make is that unity is used by the nation state to create what I call, at least in the South Asian experiment, there is the patriotism of hate. Okay? Now we all live in neighborhoods. Our neighbor, between our and the neighbor's house, there's a wall, right? We never say the person on the other side is my enemy, right? Yes. Is my friend. If something happens, you cook something, right? We have a tradition, we take something, give it to a neighbor. The same thing needs to happen. In India and Pakistan, we have hated each other from way too long. What technology has done is, it is now making the border irrelevant. How many of you here have friends on social media from across on the other side? Raise your hand. You get my point, right? The border is becoming irrelevant. You FaceTime them, you talk to them on Facebook, on Twitter, you do WhatsApp with them. And so what is happening? This is challenging now for governments. Now what is happening is that we control people-to-people interaction by controlling visas. Because people get on Twitter, they have all kinds of people, sometimes have birthdays, and they connect people together. So the internet has helped to be able to promote more dialogue across the border. So coming back to the original point of dialogue and action, there are two ways to see that happen. And then I was at a conference in 2003 in Geneva, the World Council of Churches, that looked at the topic of dialogue and action. And what they said was that some groups, what they do is they come together and have local intrafaith groups who will dialogue together, and then they'll say, okay, there's some need in our community like homelessness. They'll take up something that impacts everyone in your society, right? And take issue to work with. That's one way to do is go from dialogue to action. What was found in research was that a lot of young people, yes.
Sir, my name is Tarunjit, and I want to know, that interfaith dialogue can bring peace. It also can be dealt with extremism.
Yes, and I'll come to peace with you in a minute. So I'll come to that. The young people, you all live in a world of Twitter. You don't have time to dialogue with somebody and then talk about action. What young people want to do is act together first. And what it does, the dialogue happens in the process. Exactly. Means we were yesterday at Alhambra, where they had the All Pakistan Mosiki conference, and the comment was made that if it had not been for Sunni Muslims and for Christians, music in this country, Mosiki, would be very different. So what I'm saying is, each community makes a contribution to culture, and sometimes it's there but we don't see it. We have to be able to see young people want to see, people of the older generation want to go in this direction. People of your generation want to go in this direction. You want to act and work together on environmental issues. Look at how much garbage there is in South Asia, right? People love to throw garbage. It means if it's out of my courtyard, it's not my problem, right? Somebody else's problem. So young people, even in the US, there is the Intrafaith Alliance, and they bring people together for service projects, and dialogue happens in the process. You also will not imagine, and this is, I think let's talk about South Asia, but in the US, I each class of about 200 students, very large classes. And there are times when I can do a survey of students electronically without people raising their hand. And I ask students, how many of you have affiliation with one religious tradition? Only less than 10% of my students in America have one faith religious affiliation. If I ask two then you have 5%. So what are the rest 15% doing? They are not irreligious. They are what they call that is spiritual, but not religious. That is to say, they are not affiliated with any one religious tradition. But they can still be spiritual. That's the challenge we have today. Every religion has essence or the values of a religion. Wearing a turban, dressing up in a certain way, praying in a certain way is the form of religion, right? It's not the essence of religion. What young people want is the essence of the religion. The Catholic Church has recognized that. So if you look at Pope Francis talked about how the dogma is not important, but how a Catholic lives his or her life. So what is he trying to do? He's trying to bring spirituality back. Any religion that at this time fails to bring spirituality back, you go to the mosque on maybe Friday, right? We know of Muslims and Sikhs, go to Gurdwara or the mosque on Jummah Day, Friday, or in our case Sunday. Other than faith doesn't mean anything to us, right? What I'm saying is that is a passive state. In the end, the essence is spirituality, and that's, I think, what young people are at. Now let's come to the societal perspective. I believe that the role that religion plays in a community can be of two kinds. It can be contractive, or it can be expansive. What happens is that our personal views, how we view people of other faiths, impacts whether we keep reducing, saying who are the good people. Okay, the good people are only people from my religion. And even that, the good people that are only the Wahhabis. Okay, the Ahmadiyyas cannot come in there. So that's what I call a contractive view of religion in society. An expansive view is okay. Ahmadiyyas, in my opinion, let's say as a Muslim, I don't consider them to be Muslims. Yet. So remember, I'm being excluded this right? Yet at the same time, I in my mind say, okay, they are not Muslim, but they have as much right in this country as a Muslim. So what am I doing? Exactly. So the issue is not just how you view people, are they equal to us? That is what I call is an expansive view of religion in society. For example, when Trump says that we should stop all immigration of Muslims to the US, he actually said that on there. He's giving a very contractive view here. Contractive views are the ones that are typically peddled, and I use the word peddled. Peddled in the Western context is a very petty term. Okay, peddling होते हैं गरीब लोग ही करते ना. Here, that's what peddling. Politicians love to peddle a contractive view of community because that gives them vote banks, right? And in much of South Asia we have seen that. And I'll come and talk more, but all of this as relates to Europe, South Asia, and US. So I just go through all the terminology out there. That's there. Now let's come and talk about the United States, Europe, and South. I have lived in all three countries. I remember when I was living in India, I lived 23 years. I wore a turban, but the religion didn't mean anything in the sense that I could not read our scriptures. I had no idea. Yeah, we would go to the Gurdwara maybe, on Guru Nanak birthday or twice a year. But beyond that, it didn't mean anything at all. So when I went to the US, it was clear to me that religion had a special place in society. And what I meant by that was that I had to get, is there a way to put the fan on also? See if you can. That, and I have gone back to India, okay? And I don't know if it is true in Pakistan or not, so I want your opinion. It seems to me that, at least in India, see, once I went to the US, I learned Gurmukhi, I learned how to do Granth, I learned my faith myself. So when I was in India, I was simply being a Sikh. Coming to the US, I became a monk. So there was a transition. So every time I go back now, I have my college friends, I went to engineering college from there, 35, 37 years ago. religion. And the impression I have is, what they're telling me is, it is okay for you to be a Sikh. You can wear a turban, you can do all the rituals that you want, but don't talk about morality coming from your religion. In the Western context, in the US, there's a word for that. We call it hip. So here I'm caught between two cultures and two words, right? I have lived most of the time in the US, so when I go, I'm like, so if somebody wants to be a Hindu, why are they and not following the values of Hindus? Because in the essence, if you see, the essential values of many religious traditions are very, the form is different on the outside, right? But inside, the essential values of compassion, love, forgiveness have always been the same. Now that we come and talk a little bit about US and Europe, and I also want to talk about Pakistan and India and compare. Yes, sir.
Wasn't it like the identity crisis in your case because you went to USA and you saw that I am separate from the white or the English people there, so you somehow built your identity there by learning the Sikh traditions and
right.
stuff. So is it like the community contrasting you to become a more religious and not mingling with the Western?
Oh no, what I mean religious, I mean in terms of the values of the faith. What I have to tell you is that of all my friends in Columbus, Ohio, less than 2% are Indian or Sikh. The people I meet with are all essentially white.
Yeah, so that's the point where you realize that I'm separate from them. Like
right.
I'm not the American. I'm Indian and I'm Sikh. I should learn about.
But that's where I've changed. That's where I would disagree. My students, who come to my class are typically second-year engineering students, and sometimes they ask me, "Where are you from?" And I just tell them that I came to America before you all were even born. Okay? It settles the debate. Okay? They understand what I mean. Okay? I view myself as an American. Okay? I've lived there 32 years. How long should I live? So what has happened is, this is the challenge that is happening, is that in a country like the US, which is fully immigration-based, right? Brown people now and black people in the next 20, 30 years will become a majority. And what this means is the white community feels threatened by that. So Trump was one example of that. But, for example, when we go to Chinese restaurant in America in particular, the Chinese waiter will ask us, "Where are you from?" My children right away will say, "Oh, we are American," because yes, they were born in the US. I have a daughter who's 25, I have a daughter who turned 21 yesterday. I have a son who's in 11th grade. They were born and brought up there. I view myself as an American. But your point is, many Americans don't view me. They still view me as a
outsider.
Exactly. But that is a tension that over time, I think would resolve. And that's my way of telling my students, "Oh, I came to Ohio State even before any of you were born," because they are all 21, 22-year-old students. So, but that's a healthy discussion. I think I'm glad you pointed. It's all about identity, right?
Because many communities living in the Western, mostly the South Asian, or any community living outside of their country, and so they feel their identity crisis and they go back to the ancient traditions than the people living in their country.
So you differentiated religion from culture when you moved.
That's absolutely right. That's the second goal I created to pick that up. In American society, when you look at the American way immigration happened, when the Italians came, completely into American country, what survived? Religion survived. So America has been a great experiment in which the religion does not get subsumed into the larger society. It's what we call now. See, when the immigrants came to the US in the 1960s, there are two ways that, two terms that are used called assimilation and accommodation. When the immigrants came, let's say in the early 1900s, the white immigrants who came in before that, when they came into society in the US, they culturally assimilated, but the religion never assimilated. So America has been a place in which your culture will not survive. That is why for me to say that I am Indian will never work, but it's in conflict with my American identity. But for most of them, you must have heard the term Muslim American. Now it is complementary rather than kind of being in competition. But culture is something that ultimately over a couple of generations does assimilate in society. One other thing that has happened which causes tension in the US, and that is that the immigrants who came to the country till about the 1930s or 40s were the quota system that essentially helped Europe came to the US culturally assimilated. So now that children and grandchildren are grown-up citizens, immigrants who came after the 1970s, including those from Pakistan and India, in large numbers, they don't want to assimilate in society, they only want to accommodate to the extent that you have. What this means is that the larger white community wants you to assimilate, but as you rightfully said, you want to have your own identity. This is that tension I'm talking about in society that happens. And so Trump used that anti-immigrant rhetoric, yes.
So how the religion can play a role here in that society where the people are from different communities and different cultures.
Right.
So how the religion can play to come together them and like to be in a religious pluralism.
Yes, I'm going to come to that. Okay? That's a good point. For immigrants in the US who want to maintain a national identity, cultural identity, like in Pakistan and India, that space is very limited because it is in conflict with the American identity. So what most have figured out is that to maintain your religious identity is complementary to your cultural identity as an American. Okay? So that has helped in the process. Now, there are two other strains that are happening. And I made this comment, and some of you may have heard of this, and then I have some thoughts about South Asia. Much of Europe, and I just came back from a trip to Bosnia Herzegovina. Oh my God, what a terrible country, Bosnia. You have Serbian Orthodox Christians fighting against Bosnian Muslims and Croatian Catholics. And they're eating throats. Absolutely horrendous. So what has happened is that Europe is talking about freedom from religion. They are not talking about freedom of religion. They want freedom from religion. Religion is not good, and you want to practice religion in your mosque or your synagogue or your gurdwara or your church, do it. But don't. See, the idea of religion is very negative. It's what we call, they want freedom from religion. In the US, the dialogue is about freedom of religion. That religion is freedom only saying. Do you have a question or comment? So now what is happening is, in the second I finished that part. So you have freedom from religion and freedom of religion. One is European, other is the US context. What I am now trying to figure out is in much of South Asia, in which side is it falling? Freedom of religion and freedom from religion. Mera apna sense, again, I haven't made up my mind, is it seems what South Asia wants to do is talk about freedom of religion when it comes for my religion. And when it comes to other people's religion, I want freedom from religion. What do you all think? Somebody had a hand up.
So I said, why is it the case that the academic people in Europe and US are now seeing religion as something obsolete and outdated, especially after this movement of new atheism?
The challenge is that religion, there has been a relation between religion and violence. There is no doubt. And I'll talk about that. Religion, media blames religion as the cause of violence. Now if you look at the situation in Palestine, okay? The fight really is over water and resources. Now there is a religious angle to it, right? But the media portrays this as essentially a religious conflict. My view is that religion It's not religion that is the problem. Religious people are the problem. We are the problem. When politicians get into bed with religious leaders, watch out. That's trouble. Politicians only want one thing. That's their vote, right? That's all they care about. And religious leaders, when they get into politicians, are essentially, that's what I said, is we have contracted the rule of religion in society. Yes,
Sir, just making up the last question with this one, as you mentioned that when you were staying in your country where your majority of the people were practicing Sikhism, the place where you were living, and you didn't felt the values as when you went to the Western world. Maybe that's an element of insecurities about the existence of the religion in a portion, as I've seen in South Hall, most of the Gurdwara people going there with a special festive and with another energy, and similarly people building up mosques in their houses. And the other thing that adds up with that, over there, as they are existing where there is all around the region. So does it connect it well with that?
Yeah. A lot of communities who have gone abroad have created what I call ghettos. Okay? That is to say that the only people I meet, if I say out of 10 people, see the people who you work with, you don't have a choice, right? And the street you live on, your neighbors are your neighbors. So I ask people in the US that tell me, how many people do you meet with on a regular basis who are not from your community? So if you're a Pakistani, non-Pakistani Muslims, okay? That's what your identity is, who don't live on your street, and you don't, those people you have to work with, right? The people who work and live on the street. That's where you find out how integrated you are in society. Many of the older generation have actually less than my fingers on my hand. That's troublesome. So the only people other than your own community you're meeting are those. In my case, I would say 9 out of 10 are not from my community. So that you have to be still integrated in society. But you know, it's like, you know, there's the lotus flower in the pond, right? The flower is part of the pond, but it still is always separate. Yes, sir.
Sir, we are discussing about the religious pluralism. So isn't we unjusted with this topic if we don't mention the shrine cultures?
Which cultures?
Shrine culture, Sufi culture, saints.
Of course, absolutely. That has been a huge part of religious pluralism in this country. When I came last time, I went to a place, Juma night, right? So I went for Tamal to Apna, I'll come in a second, to Apna Madhulal Hussain, and I took a video of the Tamal and dancing. So I went and showed it to my class, and 2 of my students from the Middle East were horrified. And believers of Islam, you know what I mean? They could not believe it. They said these people are non-believers. I'm like, but that is your view. Yes, very sharp, yes.
Sir, because we are not interested in visiting the mosque, or as you said that Muslim goes to mosque or Sikh goes to Gurdwara, why you don't mention that there are some shrines where every Sikh, every Muslim, everyone can visit?
Absolutely, yes. For example, I'll take the example of Madhulal Hussain. Okay? Imagine, such a long time ago, a Hindu fakir falling in love with a Hindu young boy. Talk about sexuality. Can you imagine how revolutionary that was? Number one. Secondly, he changed his name from Shah Hussain to Madhulal Hussain. Third, he's writing kafis that are against the mullahs. How much more revolution do you want? You know what I mean? At that time. Means today, we do things, but what? The intelligence people will come and give a phone call, you know, to me and ask me questions. Their type of consequences. People who go to their grave, you know, Shah Hussain is here and Madhulal is next to her. But the point I want to make is even in this country, with so much of conservative Islam, there is a very liberal Islam that also is expansive. That is there. Now, I do want to make some comments on Pakistan also. I'm also watchful of time. I have a TV program at 4 o'clock at Al-Hamra, so I want to be able to touch upon things. Okay. Let me come to South Asia. South Asia has been, I think, an interesting experiment in terms of religion. Pakistan indeed was established as an Islamic nation. Jinnah, as most of you know, was minimally a Muslim. You know, he drank, he rarely said namaz, but he realized that a place needed to be created where Muslims could still experience freedom. He was a pragmatist. He realized that in a society that Gandhi wanted one vote, one person, that Muslims get decimated. But we see that same thing happening with Sikhs and with Muslims in India today. So, in some ways, I think Jinnah saw what was going to come, and that's what he called as a leader, who can see before things happen and say, okay, if this happens, this is likely to happen. So, number one, my experience has been that having lived in India, India does have a certain level of religious freedom, which I think for religious minority is higher than what Pakistan has. However, Pakistan is now on the upward trend. For religious freedom for minorities, India is going down. So both, one is higher than both. One is the upward curve, the other is down. And this is where religious nationalism comes in. Now, Pakistan has had its own experiment with religious nationalism, right? It began with Ziaul Haq, and you see PTV, and one of the TV speakers, her chutney or head covering fell off, and she was fired. I remember the shows at that time, and Tahira Sai, remember that singer? Whenever she comes, she would sing that song, Abhi Ko Main Jawan Hoon. When Chacha used to say, Mera dada paas hai ke chak ke le aao. Bottom line is, then the Taliban came here. Now remember, one incident happened in this country.
British, sir.
Honey?
Also British, when British come here in India.
Absolutely. One thing happened here through which this country realized where religious nationalism takes you, that is the bombing of the school in Peshawar.
APS.
That was the defining moment. And I still remember, मैंने बाबरे में रियासी थे, कहता कि जो अमेरिका की पंजाबी समझते हो जो अमेरिका कहते ना जो अमेरिका इंडिया कर रहे हैं, कहते वो सड़क असी ना पाए, ये तो सड़क ही मतलब, कहते वो जेडी कट्टरता दी धर्म दी कट्टरता दी सड़क है ना, कहते पाकिस्तान असी उतने हुआए हैं, असी देख ले वाला कि हशर होता है, कहते उतने उसी ना आज, but Trump did it. Trump wants to come back and be elected. And Modi knows that he will. He's even his expert. The Modi is actively using, for example, Babri Masjid, right?
Yes, sir.
What is symbolism? अच्छा हिंदू और पूछो कि भी मेरे बड़े हिंदू फ्रेंड्स हैं कि भी when was रामचंद्र जी born? They don't know, but they know exactly where he was born. That is so bad. That's right. I don't know when he was born, but he was born right here. Yes, sir.
Sir, what was the religion of Guru Nanak?
Guru Nanak claimed he was a messenger of God, and tomorrow is his birth anniversary, 550 seconds on Guru Nanak Sahib, and he brought God's message. We believe as Sikhs that God sends messengers at different times, different parts of the world. So we use Prophet Muhammad, we look at Jesus, we look at all of them as messengers of God, and we similarly view our gurus also as messengers of God, and we believe that all religions go to the same path. So now, for example, I'm staying at Gymkhana. So there are many ways I can go. Your way, you may go from this side, I may go from that side, but the purpose of all of us is to get to God. Now that we move on, I don't think we have much time, but I'm glad we have an interaction. And yes.
Sir, as you said that these are the religious people who are using the religion and not the religion itself. And you are taking the side of in the debate, freedom from religion or freedom of religion. You are taking the side of freedom of religion.
That is my bias.
Yeah. Okay.
My bias is freedom of religion.
Sir, don't you think that it's the religion who provides the ground to exploit it?
Sure.
It's the religion that provides the ground for
religion is a very powerful force. It can be used for immense good and immense destruction. I'll give the same is true for the internet. Simply because people do terrorism and funding the internet, would you throw the internet out? No. It can also be used for a lot of good. There are people talking across the border, right? My point being is, religion is a very deep and important well of wisdom. And we can use it, but people then have to be committed, saying, okay, if Islam calls upon me to be compassionate, I have to be compassionate to everyone, including the Ahmadiyya, whom I may say that person is, is Ahmadiyya, is not a Muslim, but I still should be able to give that person the same rights that I might. That's what I mean is compassion.
But throughout the history, we never see this like the religion play a good role in a society.
I would disagree with that. Religion has played an immense
destructive.
Yes, go ahead.
So if you're good, you're religious, and you know the moral values of religion, then that is your personal life. But in a country such as Pakistan, I think religion is used to incite violence, to control the masses, and incite violence. But if you're good and religious, that is personal. But political is violence.
And that's the whole issue, that when, again, I say when politicians and religious leaders get into bed, you have trouble. Trump did that. In this country, it happened too.
It's like Khadim Rizvi, and what the country was in uproar.
Exactly. That's why you had a comment.
So in London recently a poll was done regarding Khalistan, where 70 to 80% Sikhs condoned creation of the state. So what the reason they cited is that RSS and the Hindu Mahasabha is working in order to preserve the Hindu identity in India, and is alienating Sikhs. So as your experience as an Indian citizen, sir, what do you think such movements are justified?
I'll give a larger perspective first. I'll make a blanket statement. The time when nation states based on religion can be created is over this way. That time is done. So it doesn't matter if it is Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, the time for nation state based on religion to see more freedom. Whether that's within India or outside, but any country making a new country today based on religion is not simply practical. It simply is not going to happen. And sometimes people use that. Let me just make a few comments, then I'll open it up. Okay? Let's talk about peace building. People of faith, at least where I come from the US, most of the work that we do is around peace building, which happens at a local level. That you focus on a certain project. Now, for example, for my organization, Religious Peace USA, we have taken climate change is one. Look at the smog you have in Lahore, right? And now from here I'm going to Delhi. So you can imagine one city, क्या कहते हैं वो आसमान तो गिरा है my mom lives in Delhi. And so being able to, for peace building, what is important is compassion. In fact, the Dalai Lama has said that if you don't have compassion, you can't be religious. And I agree with that. That compassion is a fundamental religious value. Other than, right, you can do anything you want. But till you have compassion and start living it out, there's no way one can move forward. That becomes important. The last comment I'll make, and then we have time for some open comments and discussion for 10 minutes. By 3 can I need to leave. And coming back to 2 points you made, that religions have been shown to be in conflict with each other. Yes, the Sikh religion and Mughals were in conflict. But let's be very careful. The Mughals did not represent Islam. The Mughals used Islam for the political purpose. Maharaja Ranjit Singh used Sikhism for his political purposes. It's again, and the British who came, we never say that the British, are Christian. They were Christian. They used Christianity. So we have to make a distinction between the ruler and the religion that we have. But what has been projected is that religions do this. I think in reality they are more complementary to each other. And the Sufi shrines are one example of a soft edge of religion where we actually can come together. And I'll end with something in the Reader's Digest that I read a long time ago. I always stayed in the US. So every year there's a festival happening. Every summer, everyone brings the biggest pot that they have. So there's a competition. And एक अगर फार्मर होता है तो 10 साल लगातार ही wins the prize for best crop. एक रिपोर्टर होता है कि एरिया में बोलते होता है कुछ let me go and ask maybe how does he do it? Well, he goes to his okay ज्यादा dependent तो मैं पूछता है कहता है कि करता है ये तो बड़ा शौक है कहता मैं का बीज है ना और सारे कमांडियर में बढ़ता कहता कि हवा जो चलेगी मेरे कमांडी के खेत तो मेरे वाला आएगी. So the same thing needs to happen right now. What is the biggest health challenge going on right now in Lahore? Dengue, right? Guess what? The same dengue is going on also. When the wind blows, that's my point. Is that we are more interlinked with each other than we are willing to recognize, and our roles are more complementary. So we shouldn't be seeing this worldview is what gets politicians votes. What we really want to be able to do is have more complementary roles. So with that, I'll stop. And if you can moderate the Q&A, and then I will have to get done by 3:10. But I'm glad that we had conversations as we were going along. So thank you.
Any question? Sir, as it mentioned, yours is freedom from religion. And I believe there are some impacts like globalization, the economic purposes for that, they are moving towards that thing. But what do you think over here in South Asian countries, most of us believing in modernization also believe that freedom from religion is the solution. So what are your thoughts on this?
Religion will always be a very strong force for good and evil. And the reason why we have a negative view of religion is because we have seen or focused more on the negative side of religion than the positive side. So the issue is not that, it's how we use religion. Throwing religion away is not going to help. But it's so deeply embedded in this culture of South Asia. So deeply. So I don't see a future of South Asia without religion. I think religion has to be dealt with, but religion has to be something that empowers you. It has to be something that has to be expansive and not that. Our problem is we are stuck.
Sir, I can add here, but I have a belief that because here in Pakistan we are not provided, we are not offered the opportunities to question our religion, right? So at times she tells me that I'm doing my major in psychology, and sometimes we go deep religion, or I study something that goes deep religion. So she tells me, oh, तुम तो पेचे सूझ रहा हो, तुम तो मुसलमान नहीं हो सकते हो, so I think because we are not provided opportunities to question about it, and when you went to Europe, or when you reached out of that boundary, is where you explored religion, where you explored your religion. So here in Pakistan, we are not provided that opportunity. That is why we feel very, we feel unsafe.
You're physically passive, but mentally, you are open. You're very progressive. When I came to Pakistan the first time 2 years ago, मैं लाहौर एयरपोर्ट गया कि मैं बुरके वाली गोलियां देखी यार लेकिन आकर ये बुरके वाली है what makes the West makes this view that all Muslim men will wear a white topi. Bollywood movie देखिए ना सुनी हाँ all Muslim women will wear a black burqa.
Sir, surma and that.
Oh my God, लोग आँख माती करके रखी हो ये कहते and there are few of them. What I'm saying is the view of the society that the world has, but I find it to be very liberating. Looking at women typically here are more educated than men. We all know that. I've met so many friends. He himself has passed only 12th grade, and his wife has bachelor's or master's. Okay, make sure you don't marry one of those guys. That's important, right? So, there has to be equity, right? And so, thank you. Let's go to somebody who's going to ask a question.
Sir, in this item, how can we preserve our culture?
Your culture will survive in this society, but it will change. Let me tell you what I mean by that. If you go and ask, maybe even for you, culture or religion, go and ask your mother कि जो Islam को practice करते हैं, उन्होंने mother भी इस तरह करती थी? No.
Religion or culture तो separate है. Culture तो
But religion and culture is not separate here.
I understand that, but the same applies to culture. That the culture of where your mother lived versus your grandmother was different. So culture will change, culture will evolve, religion will evolve. Religion is not meant to be. When Guru Nanak was born in 1469, we live by the rules of the time. That's the mistake we make. Yes, Prophet Muhammad gave us the yardsticks a Muslim would live by, but he was not prescriptive. There is enough leeway, and I see questioning has consequences. But you can question independently. So let nobody ever tell you. I tell all my students that it's always challenge. I could be wrong, right? Or any of us could be wrong. This whole thing about God could all be made up. Maybe God doesn't exist, right? It's possible. Maybe it's all made up and it's a concoction. So but the point is, you always have to be open to the possibility that you are wrong. Let's take one more question. People on this side, yes.
I don't have a question, but a comment. I would say that a comment. I think religion is the whole notion to exploit people and gather them and giving them identity. God has stopped sending messengers anymore. So therefore, all religions have failed to be adaptable with the modern standards. So I think what's emerging now is with the emergence of mass media and social media and all those platforms, people have reached out beyond their boundaries. So what's the new religion is, I think, what you mentioned, like people are discussing climate changes, and then economic instability and inequality. I think these are the new questions, and science is the new religion. Like every person in society, and if I'm a Muslim, my brother is a Muslim, we have a different approach to religion. Every person is an information and a world in himself. Within Islam, every person has a different religion, different world. So pluralism does exist.
Even in Islam, there's pluralism, right? Immense amount of.
So the world is getting globalized. It's just about when you are going to accept it.
Again, like I said, I am not one of the people who believe in freedom from religion. Is an extremely important force for good and for evil. The problem is we have to take it from here. That's our challenge. But religion still will continue. I request Killer to give some closing remarks. Okay. I will only have a minute. If you all want to take a picture, just
yes,
1 minute, and then I will run out.
Okay, just to summing it up, thank you very much, Professor Butalia, for giving such a insightful talk. I want to just conclude with the famous theory of Samuel P. Huntington, Clash of Civilization. End of History by Francis Fukuyama, जिन्होंने बिल्कुल वो दरवाजा ही बंद कर दिया कि हिस्ट्री में एक इंडिविजुअल ने इंडिविजुअल से सीखा है, सोसाइटी ने सोसाइटी से सीखा है, और सिविलाइजेशन ने सिविलाइजेशन से सीखा है, और सिविलाइजेशन मेजॉरिटी सिविलाइजेशन की जो बुनियाद थी उसमें रिलीजन का क्या रोल था उसको इग्नोर करते हुए एंड ऑफ हिस्ट्री कर दिया है. ये अमेरिकन थिंक टैंक्स की अंडरस्टैंडिंग थी. कल मैं बात खत्म करते हुए मैं कल और ये सीखना जो हमारा जारी है, कल मैं भाटी गेट पे वीर जी के साथ था. वीर जी की वीर जी का जो ताल्लुक है वो गुजरांवाला से है. ठीक है, गुजरांवाला आधा इनका था 45 से 1947 में फिर मूव. तो लाहौर को हमसे ज़्यादा ये जानते हैं, लेकिन रात हमने एक बड़ा एक ऐड देखा. ये अगर आप तस्वीर देख सकें, ये तस्वीर पे एक साइड पे खाना काका, दूसरी साइड पे प्रॉफिट मोहम्मद का वो रोज़ा है. ठीक है, अच्छा ये देख लें, और ये दरम्यान से फटा हुआ है लेकिन शेर बड़े अच्छे अच्छे लिखे हुए हैं. नीचे में टेक्स्ट है,
चलिए ग्रुप में शेयर करें,
मैं शेयर करूंगा. अच्छा, नीचे टेक्स्ट लिखा हुआ है और लिखा हुआ है कटरा बाबा नानक गुजर. Right? So you can't deny the learning, diversity, pluralism.
सर एक श्राइन है वो उधर जो है गुरु नानक का भी लगा हुआ है, इस्लाम का भी लगा, सब कुछ लगा हुआ है. वो श्राइन में वो कहते हैं कि ये सब का है,
Yes, sir.
उधर सब
गुरु नानक सब
काफी से मस्जिद पे जाकर गुरु नानक करने लगा उन्होंने और मस्जिद की साफ सफाई।
तो इसी पे प्रोफेसर बुतालिया very helpful for our serious.
I wish I had more time as you can.
Yeah, and we will do that. हम यहीं पे बैठे रहेंगे, आप वहाँ पे जाएंगे, मैं भी उधर आ जाऊँगा, मैं
हाँ, best है, बनाओ
तस्वीर आपके साथ ग्रुप फोटो हो जाए।
ये बाइक नहीं लेते सर, ये स्टेज पे बड़ा अच्छा है।
खैर